Welcome attendees. Welcome to the space. Welcome.
Oh, hello. Excited to talk to everybody about oxytocin and intimacy and pleasure and all the things.
Yes, I am so excited to be in this space. I'm so excited to be here today with Blackberry hosting this amazing event, Oxytocin Flow Workshop. So we would have loved to drop some tracks, but we're going to just maybe create a list later. I'm excited to be here as we just talk about pleasure and intimacy. A lot of taboo feeling things, definitely. And when you think about the postpartum space. And so I would love to just start with introductions. And so I'll have you, Jay, go ahead and introduce yourself, and then I can tell people who I am.
Okay, so hello everybody. I am Jay. I use she and they pronouns. I am a full spectrum doula with pleasure and intimacy as one of my focus areas. And so I support people specifically for birth, but also loss and pleasure and intimacy. So I love working with postpartum families, but also pregnant families and people who are not desiring to become parents at all. I work with folks just if they want to connect better to themselves, if they are kink curious or have had trauma or anything like that, and they're just wanting to explore their relationship with intimacy and pleasure, then I work with folks. And so that's the lens that I am bringing here today and excited to share a little bit more.
Yes. Well, I am Tiffany Dickerson. I'm coming to you guys from Dallas, Texas. So a little suburb outside of Dallas. You'll probably hear my accent um, throughout the coalition, so throughout the presentation today. But I'm just really excited to be here in this space. I own the Breast Choice Lactation Services, and I just support families with healing our community through breastfeeding. And so whatever that looks like for them, whether it's breast chest feeding, whatever terms resonate for that family. And so I do identify as she and her pronouns. And so today, we'll be mindful of our language and context and make sure that this feels like an inclusive environment and a safe space. And we are just so excited to really connect with you guys. And so I'm going to be kind of dropping some of my lactation nuggets and disseminating some information around how lactation and breast and chest feeding play into this intimacy and postpartum. I'll be sharing from lived experience and clinical experience as well. And I know that you guys are going to leave here so much more empowered. It has been an honor working alongside Jay. And when she gave that little intro, but she is seriously an expert in this. And so I know that you guys are going to leave with such a wealth of knowledge and information, and I cannot wait to share everything with you guys today.
Yes, I think part of what we have here is a lot of info. And when talking about someone's lactation journey, their pleasure journey, it can vary and it can be really personal, right? And so we also want to say that if at any point you have questions and wonderings or curiosities, drop them in the chat. Questions are welcome, and this workshop will really be specific to you. We want to make sure if you're here right now that you have the opportunity to get those questions answered. So don't feel shy to drop a question. Also in this space, no question is off limits, So, all right, to me, no question is off limits. We might get a surface answer and be like, all right, email me. But but you can ask all the questions. We can talk about the things. And I know often when we're talking about pleasure, intimacy, sex, orgasm, all of those things, that it can feel taboo to say the words or to share something that someone's going through. But this is a space where you can do that. So just wanting to make sure that we share those things before we hop in.
Yes. And with our goal of really disseminating information that is going to resonate with our audience that's here, I would love to see you guys drop in the comments maybe where you're from, where you're joining us from, and then with you what your background and what your specialty is. Are you a midwife? Are you a doula? Are you coming from a lactation space? Are you all of the above? Are you a pleasure specialist like Jay? What kind of where does your background come from? So if you can drop that in the chat so that we can really make sure that our talk is curated towards you guys. And Jasmine is in the background helping us with the comments and the chat. So there are a couple of different options in there. There should be a question and answer. There should also be like a general chat where you can also just talk to us back and forth while we're in here. If you have something that comes to your mind, just go ahead and drop it. And if we talk it, we're going to come back to it and make sure we answer it during this session.
Yes. So again, like Tiffany said, go ahead and drop how you're showing up. So your connection to this work. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, we would love to know. And the Q&A section is totally fine. We can see that because I think someone mentioned that the chat wasn't available. So use the Q&A section.
I'm checking to see if anybody is responding to us and letting us know. Jasmine, do you see anybody responding in there? Maybe not.
No, I don't see anyone.
Okay. Well, if you want to share with us where you're from and kind of, again, where space you come from, if you come from midwife or doula, or how you're joining us and coming into the space today, then definitely drop that in the chat and we'll just make sure that our information is definitely curated towards you. But we're going to hop right on into this. And so, as we start to talk about so much about oxytocin, which is that, that love hormone, that ooh and that ah, and those warm, fuzzy feelings that you may get whenever you are looking at your baby, whenever you are having those bonding moments. Um, you want to start to kind of remember that we may be coming from a different place. And so we start to really think about our history. We want to think about our culture. We want to start to really consider those things. This is not a space where you feel like you got to whisper into somebody's ear and ask a question. You can definitely put it into the chat. Like Jay said, there are no questions off limit. Sometimes in our lactation profession, specifically, it may feel like, oh, I shouldn't talk about that thing. But there's really nothing that is off limits in this space. Everything is welcome and it's a completely safe space. And so just kind of thinking from my own, lived experience, I was a first generation breastfeeding parent. And so I have a 4-year-old and an 8-year-old. I have two girls. And with my 8-year-old, I like to really call it like being ejected into motherhood. Like I've been a nurse, I come from a nursing background and I have been a nurse for like 17 years or 10 years at that point, but 17 now. And I took care of like multiple babies and it was just like I thought motherhood was going to come to me so naturally. It was going to just be such a breeze. Like shoot, I could take care of 3 babies in a 12-hour shift every 3 hours and feed all them and change their diapers and make sure that all their needs are met. Surely, when I have this one child, I'm going to be able to just handle motherhood like a breeze, right? And it was extremely humbling for me. And while my mother was extremely supportive, she did not breast or chest feed myself or my sister. And so, being a first generation, I didn't really have anything to look back on. And so, when I started to ask, questions about like, oh, mom, did my grandmother breastfeed? Did your mom breastfeed? Um, no, and she started to share with me stories about the stigmas behind it, about enduring, the racism that we endured during slavery, even like the wet nursing, and how things that happened back in history became a negative connotation on breastfeeding. And so it just really empowered me and reminded me of like, oh my gosh, I really am like breaking this generational cycle and this generational curse. And I'm really doing something completely different. And so now nobody else is breastfeed. So how am I going to be asking about some intimacy questions about breastfeeding when I don't even really have that lived experience in my family of anyone that has done that? And so it was just like a blank slate for me of like navigating it. And I remember some things that I experienced again from a lived experience. And then as I got into the lactation space, having my clients share things with me about their own, like, okay, so is this still safe to do? Or I don't really want to ask, I don't know who to ask this question to, is what I would hear. And I was happy to be a sounding ear, but I'm excited to have our expert Jay in here because she's helping me even take some more nuggets back into my practice when we really think about the intimacy and the pleasure component of that and what that means for each birthing person and lactating person.
Yes, and I think, I like to say community educator, because we all
Yes.
show up as experts in our own lived experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of my approach is from a way that feels really tangible and accessible for everyone. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I love that you brought up how your family history impacted your own experience, and even culturally, there's a lot of experience. So when enslaved, yes, there's a history of like wet nursing, but also sexual assault and rape was happening. And so the connection to our own bodies, our connection to pleasure, is also something that experienced a disconnect. And so
Mm-hmm.
now, after having a baby, people are already kind of struggling with how do I reconnect to my body, let alone if I'm also lactating and nursing, like that adds just a whole different piece into the mix. And so I love to talk about this. I also have two children that I've birthed, three total. And after my first son, I was already doing doula work. And what I noticed, a lot of people, like I would do postpartum visits, support them in a variety of ways. And towards the end, when that 6 weeks was coming up, they're about to go,
Mm-hmm.
have their visit where they get cleared for intimacy. I would always have clients like, as I'm heading out or wrapping up the visit, so Jay, can I ask you something?
Mm-hmm.
Like it was always that kind of like whispering. And I'm like, yeah, what's up? Let's talk about it,
Yeah.
and it was often around like pleasure and intimacy. And so some
Mm-hmm.
people would be like excited and ready, but have some questions. Other people would be like, ugh, I am not ready for this. How do I navigate this? And things of that nature. And so that's when I really started diving in even deeper to that connection, because there really was a gap in pleasure connected to parenthood and what that looks like in that kind of in between space of I'm freshly postpartum and my relationship to my body may already be a little iffy right now and I'm lactating. Like, how do I navigate this? And so that's really where I'm showing up as we talk more about this. But as you're supporting clients, because I see we have some doulas, some nurses in the space, I think it's also really important to recognize the cultural piece of this,
Mm-hmm.
as well as someone's own like family history when it comes to pleasure or intimacy or things of that nature, and how you may be showing up to support.
Yeah, I would totally agree with you. And again, I'm excited to have you in here as our pleasure expert to really chime in and really give us some tangible things because a lot of people that are in this space with us today are probably here for, if you're coming from a lactation consultant, some of the things I say you may have heard before. You may be familiar with the hormones, right? But you're going to actually get Jay is an expert giving you some tangible things as we navigate through this session today. So I'm really excited about that. And again, just feeling like, I even remember as I became a new parent, I was like, okay, how do you even navigate intimacy while you're caring for another human? Like, what does that even look like? Do you put them in the other room? Like, how are you having those intimate moments with your partner as you navigate this in postpartum? Is it like, is it a lights off kind of situation where you just are detached from your body and you're like, I need the lights off during this intimate moment? Um, are there some conversations that should be had, And so it's just really this opportunity of like, okay, thinking about where the stigmas may have come from and going back into history just briefly, and then propelling ourselves forwards and starting to think about how we may help our families. Because if they are thinking some of these questions and not asking them, it's a moment of opportunity for us to definitely explore and kind of open the floor and do a little check in. And I found sometimes that one of the things that I'm definitely asking on my intakes is like, do you have a history of, any kind of trauma, any sexual abuse? And so why not? Like, why couldn't we incorporate that on there? Do you have any questions about intimacy and pleasure as you navigate postpartum and that becoming a part of their intake? And so that's an important history or intake or questionnaire opportunity that may open up a dialogue, especially with you, Jay, is doing doula work. If they kind of have that question, it's like, oh, I can just check this box off, and they don't feel like it's as stigmatized. So, and then I just think this is an opportunity to really just reclaim things, and that, there's this over sexualization, especially in the American culture, where half the time I want to share instructional videos, and Instagram or other social media platforms, I should say, just block them because it's nudity, right? But I'm just trying to give an encouraging demonstration on hand expression so the community can learn, right? Because we're community educators and leaders, as you mentioned. But that's blocked because there's this connotation that exposing ourselves or having our breasts or chest out is something that's sexual, right? But feeding is not. It's an extremely nurturing and nutritive aspect. And so while the rest may be very sensual, that may not necessarily associate with sexist connotation. And then just, helping families understand that things may look different. Intimacy may be a lot different, how that looks, and even defining that, right? And I think that's a great thing that I would love to hear you like actually help us to define intimacy. Like, is it what we think? Sometimes people jump into something and assume that it's was one thing, but what is really intimacy? Like, what is that?
Mhm. So, stay tuned for track 3. Because we are going to discuss that, and where the same way I just said earlier, like a lot of people are experts in their own experience, that same
Mm-hmm.
to intimacy. And so we're going to talk more about it, and I'm going to provide like a little exercise or activity, both that we can
Mm-hmm.
try here and that folks can try with clients to really, dive more into what intimacy is for them, because for everyone it's going to be different,
Mm-hmm.
how they navigate pleasure, how they navigate intimacy, both within romantic and non-romantic relationships. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, we're definitely going to talk about intimacy a little bit more. So start thinking about it, y'all.
Yeah. What is intimacy? And you can even drop that in the chat because I think that's a great question starter for track 3 as we get into that playlist and that track list. Is what is intimacy, and what do you assume intimacy is? What does it mean for you? Because as you're helping navigate this family, that's going to kind of play out a little bit, right? A lot of us pour into our clients some of our own lived experiences, right? Without a bias is always the goal. But what you believe intimacy is, I would love for you guys to just take a moment and like share that in the chat so we can start to kind of unpack that a little bit more with Jay as we get into track 3.
Mhm. And even as I feel like we've talked kind of about the history, the cultural aspect some, um,
Mm-hmm.
the next piece is really understanding what's happening in the body, right? So if we have an understanding of, oh, how do these hormones work? How do these parts of the body and all of that, I think that's really supportive to start there, just a general understanding. So then when you do dive into deeper conversations and things of that nature, like that level of knowledge is there. And even when talking about intimacy and connection, to
Mm-hmm.
navigate lactation, to navigate talking about pleasure with someone, you and
Mm-hmm.
that client have to have some level of intimacy or connection, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
safety there to even have these conversations,
Mm-hmm.
um, or at least if you want to have this conversation and the person be open to really sharing and asking the questions, there has to be a level of connection there. I can only speak for myself, but I've been in situations where there's, someone there to support with lactation, but it's like, you just came in this room. I ain't never met you before. You said, hey,
Uh-huh.
my name is
Uh-huh.
Sarah. You already washing your hands and trying to
Mm-hmm.
hold
Mm-hmm.
up.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know you. My client don't know, whatever the case. And so I think the way that we approach care for people and information and connection, like intimacy is a part of that. Like you have to feel connected to some degree to anyone when you are supporting them or receiving support from them.
I love that. And that reminds me of an important component to remember as we're supporting families through any of this, whether you're supporting a family in the lactation space, is that there should always be consent with whatever we're doing. And so before I go to I'm a very hands-off approach kind of lactation consultant personally. I like to coach my clients through it because I do feel like that helps them leave with confidence and to feel empowered. And so really a hands-off approach, like yes, sometimes my hands may need to come to their body parts, but I'm always asking consent and I'm always looking and I'm reflecting on how they respond to what I'm doing because that is a community, that's a communication piece of it. And I think that's really important as I built a rapport with them. Like you mentioned, if it's their first time meeting with me, I'm probably maybe not going to be talking to them about this intimacy as we're getting in this, vulnerable space. They're already exposing themselves in the setting with me. But as we start to build that rapport and as that trust is built, then I think there's an opportunity to really allow these conversations around intimacy to naturally transition. And for me to be a resounding voice to say, hey, if there are questions you have around intimacy, I would love to share some of the amazing things that Jay has taught me about intimacy and postpartum because she definitely has been dropping some knowledge and helping me out with some stuff. Um, and so as we kind of, get ready to shift gears, I think this is a great moment, Jay, to kind of pause. I think we have a little bit of information in our little chat. So you were welcoming everybody. Oh, we got someone that's loving the questions. Some comments in here. I know I can feel close to someone when I can be emotional and vulnerable and cringe and messy around people I'm close to. And I know that they won't abandon or discard me. I love that. Thank you for posting that. It's just more than physical touch. Ooh, spoiler alert for track three. I love it. And so, yeah, it's more about feeling seen, heard, and value. And I love how you just really chime back in there and confirm that communication is both verbal and nonverbal. So as we're navigating these conversations, again, if things come up or it's a triggering moment, definitely please drop that in the chat if a question comes or even a comment. We want this to be an interactive, again, and a very safe space. So we're going to get into the nitty gritty of this and we're going to start to connect these hormones because the hormones that play a part with how these human and this human life has been created are some similar hormones that we will see also an effect in postpartum. And so from a lactation standpoint, we give education and we give community education to our families and we talk about how amazing this placenta is. And if if you're in the doula space or in lactation space, we care about the placenta for a lot of things. It's that little moment of like, woosah when it comes out, right? The afterbirth is clear. It is out of the body. For the lactation space, we know that that is what I usually call like the light switch to get things going and flowing for milk production. But it's also this open wound, right? And so with a lot of the placenta, which is the afterbirth being delivered, there is a big drop in hormones. And I really don't think that there are enough conversations around this. In our culture, I feel like in the American culture, a lot of times Western culture, we hear just like, postpartum blues happens and, oh, it's normal. But nobody's really like talking about what's happening internally in our bodies and this big shift and pivot that is happening. And so I wanted to just, touch on that a little bit today so that we can all just have a good foundational understanding. And then as we start to really bring in that intimacy component, understand how all of these are literally connected.
Yeah, it's all weave together. Yeah.
They're all weave together. Yes. So there are a couple of key hormones when I think about this. And so for me, it's that when the placenta is delivered, as I said, it's the light switch for a hormone called prolactin, which is what makes milk. So it's high in the middle of the night. It kind of peaks. And so we're encouraging our families, oh, yes, let that baby cluster feed. Let's make this milk. Let's let this milk flow. All the things, right? The light switch happens when that placenta comes out, but there's also something else that changes. The placenta is what was the bread and butter and lifeline between that baby and that birthing parent. And when that placenta is delivered, now the baby is able to breathe on his own out into this world when it comes earthside. But now there's also, with this wound in the body of the placenta being gone, there's a drastic drop in the happy hormones, right? And that estrogen that sustained the pregnancy and progesterone that sustained the pregnancy and told the body to stay pregnant are now gone. And that's what helps milk production take off and leap and prolactin to increase. But without the estrogen and progesterone on board, we lose a couple of things. And so, as we may have those lower energy moments, right? And those sometimes there's tears and there's just an emotional feeling. It's literally because all of our happy hormones that have given us that glow, right? And that have just helped nourish our baby are now also detached from us. And there are some side effects that happens. And so when you are lactating and nursing or chest or breastfeeding, your body is going to suppress your estrogen and progesterone. And that's important to know because estrogen is, without estrogen, rather, it can cause a lot more vaginal dryness, a lot more tight and uncomfortableness. So if you can imagine when intimacy is happening and you missing your little estrogen flow, and nobody's telling you because you're lactating and nursing that your estrogen is staying more suppressed, you're like, what's happening down there? Like why are things not exactly as they were before? And so here you have, as a provider, an opportunity to educate, right? As community educators, to say, hey, I want you to know that there may be some changes that happen with your body, and this is what they may look like.
Yes, I think if I can chime in real quick too,
Absolutely.
knowing that that estrogen drop, one, to kind of expect that that may happen,
Mhm.
and also naming some of those changes. So like expect some vaginal dryness, and almost to the point of if you have this, that's a part of this process that you're in.
Mhm.
I think sometimes people feel that in postpartum and with lactation, oh, these negative, quote
Mhm.
unquote, things are happening. And it's like, no, you're at this very like special, particular like time of your life. And so that's a part of this journey that you're on in postpartum. Um,
Mhm.
and so instead of seeing it like a negative thing, it's like, oh, this is an opportunity to like, let's try out some different lubes, body safe lubes, like let's incorporate some things that maybe you didn't incorporate this into your play or into your pleasure before, but
Mhm.
now we're in a new spot, so we can try something new. Um,
Mhm.
and I think approaching it in that way is often really helpful versus some folks are like, oh, I used to be Miss Wet Wet, and then now they're like, oh, feeling self-conscious,
Yeah.
especially culturally, like that can be a thing. There's different stigmas around
Mhm.
smells, fluids, things of that nature. And so if like, hey, I'm in postpartum, maybe we need to incorporate a loop now. And it doesn't mean that I'm less than or that my body isn't something or whatever the
Mm.
case. Like, no, this is an opportunity to play, an opportunity to connect with yourself in a different way. And lube is not a bad thing. And in fact, being open to using it can help your re-entrance into
Mhm.
like penetrative sex or into different types of intimacy a lot more smooth
Mhm.
versus not using it and potentially, experiencing discomfort or
Mhm.
tears or anything like that. And it's kind of similar to how in postpartum we tell folks like, during your quarantena or like first 40 days of postpartum, chill, lay it
Yeah.
down, like don't do too much. The same thing comes to intimacy, no matter the time period. You don't want to just do too much because then if you do, you may halt to your healing or like
Mhm.
end up taking some steps back versus, okay, go slow, utilize a little lube, do this, do that,
Mhm.
because we know the vaginal dryness because the estrogen is a norm. Uh,
Mhm.
and then estrogen is also what helps in certain erogenous zones to be
Mhm.
as sensitive as they are. So if you
Mm.
know that you have lower estrogen, then if before touching someone, let's say the shoulder, would do it for you, or the neck would do it for you before, and it's not really doing it for you right now. Part of that is because that area may be less sensitive because your estrogen is lower. And so just
Wow.
knowing that, oh, this is a new opportunity to connect with my body in a different way, I think supports people because they're going to it thinking, I'm gonna just do what I've been doing, my same
Hmm.
little 1-2, and the 1-2 may be a 187 now.
Hmm.
And just knowing that the shifts in the hormones are really what's responsible for that. And that's normal.
Hmm. Yeah, and I love what you said, so much of what you said, because I think it's very easy to associate a negative connotation. Like, yes, we're disseminating this for informational purposes, right? But we're not attaching a negative connotation like, oh, your estrogens, it's dropping. So, oh, you're going to be dry. It's like, that's an amazing thing because when that drops, it allows your prolactin to increase. And guess what prolactin does? Not only does it give you increased milk production, or, it's a trigger hormone for milk production, but it also is what makes you that protective parent. And so you need that. That's what makes you like, don't nobody mess with my child, right? And so it may just be this where, you know what, hey, I'm going to have this conversation. And I know we're going to get into this even more in track 3, but I'm going to have this conversation with my partner while it's challenging. And it may even feel like I'm less than. Like it's easy. It's very easy in postpartum to feel like I'm less than. We have social media now where you see, someone is bagging up bricks of milk, and you're like, oh, I'm just gonna have to feed my baby over here, which is normal, right? And so
Mhm.
I think it's just this opportunity to be like, I'm not less than. And I'm also going to have some conversations because protecting my relationship and who me and my partner were before the baby arrived is important to me. So maybe I'm just going to have a conversation of I need maybe a little warm up, and I need you to touch these different spots, or it's an opportunity to find a spot that
Yeah,
is
let's
that I'm
find
more
it.
attractive to. Like, yeah, like, oh, you found a new spot that I didn't even know existed, right? And then there's also, and we're gonna get into this, there's how these hormones actually play out during intimacy. And there's one hormone that actually is really in our favor that is intensified when there's lactation hactation, and that is the oxytocin. And we love her, or she, or them, or they, or him, or whatever they want to be. But the oxytocin hormone is the love hormone, right? And so in birth, I hear a lot of doulas, and listened to a lot of y'all childbirth education, community education programs, and you talk about oxytocin a lot in labor, right? It's the one that you want to keep amplified so you can keep those contractions going to help that baby to come earthside, to help contract on that uterus to get the baby out, right? And then in the lactation space, it's what we hear referenced a lot as the letdown hormone, or that milk ejection hormone, right? And so it's really, there is there is a association of that release happening when there is nipple stimulation, right? There's also like an emotional component to that. You can be at the store, literally, not with your baby. Like, I'm gonna go on a Target run. I remember it. I went on a Target run. I was like, oh, I'm gonna go to Target real quick. This was back in the day. Back in the day, 4 years ago. And I go on a Target run by myself, run a couple errands, go grab a couple things, and I would like, oh my gosh, what's that feeling? I would start to feel like this tingling sensation in my body, especially in my chest area, of like this just kind of like a rushing tingling up my body. And I would message my husband and say, hey, is Camille starting to wake up? And he would say, yep. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'll wrap this little Target run up and I'll be home shortly. And so it's just a really reminder of how much there's a connection, especially with oxytocin and all these hormones, really, but especially oxytocin, of the brain, right? Because the hypothalamus sends a little message to the little pituitary gland, is like, let's release this. But it's not talked about how that is the same connective pattern that happens during orgasms.
Mm-hmm. Yep, the same thing. Oxytocin, with me and oxytocin like this, you know? And so really it's a thing. Like oxytocin, like you said, supports that milk ejection reflex.
Mm-hmm.
And it supports your body feeling comfortable to experience pleasure. And so
Mm-hmm.
often when there is orgasm, there's that increase in oxytocin. And if you experience orgasm, as well as some people still have this the milk ingestion reflex, even if they haven't reached orgasm, because orgasm
Mm-hmm.
doesn't always have to happen, but you can still have the release of oxytocin just from having pleasurable like connections.
Mm-hmm.
And so some people, if they don't know that there's a possibility for like a letdown,
Mm-hmm.
it can feel like awkward or unsure
Uh-huh.
or like change
Uh-huh.
the game, for like what's going on. And
Mm-hmm.
it's okay. You and your partner want to decide how y'all feel about, milk. Um, hey, I'm like, sometimes people are like, oh, I want to keep my bra on, or maybe this is an area you
Yeah.
can't touch, or I'm gonna go pump right now. And some like, oh, feed it to me, like, hey, do you? Do what works for you. And I think just knowing that there's the potential
Mm-hmm.
or a letdown is something to be aware of. And some folks,
Mm-hmm.
if they're having lower supply, maybe it is that we need to like relax and connect and things of that nature. And maybe that will support milk with flowing. Because like you mentioned, very similar to like in labor, we want folks to chase or follow the oxytocin and the things that may allow oxytocin to become more present in the body. And so the things that make you feel safe and make you feel comfortable and make you feel connected will allow that oxytocin to release for labor to start. Same
Mm-hmm.
thing. If someone's pumping, I know often, and I'm not the lactation consultant, but often, when I have people who are stressed because they're trying to figure out the amount of milk and X, Y,
Uh-huh.
Z, I tell folks, I'll be like, what helps you to feel pleasure? What helps you to feel relaxed? And so if that's dim lights, your favorite candle, watching trash
Mm-hmm.
TV, doing
Mm-hmm.
whatever, set up in that way
Yeah.
and then pump. So then you're relaxing. You're like, oh, this is great. Oh, and I'm pumping to where that's
Mm-hmm.
secondary and you're not like just focused on that. And that
Mm-hmm.
often can help for more oxytocin to flow. And then you end up having, closer maybe to the amount that you wanted to produce. But yeah, in sex and intimacy, just knowing like, hey, I may start leaking
Mm-hmm.
and just being,
Yes.
what we gonna do? What we gonna do about it?
I think that's a big component of it because I was able to really break through with some of my clients and that became it became an opportunity of learning moment as a practitioner and a provider that like these are conversations that really need to be had because I had
Mhm.
one of my clients say, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know this could happen." And so I was like, "Oh, yes. So this is how it's connected." Just kind of educated. It was a moment of education opportunity, right? And that moment stood out and I remembered that because I'm like, okay, now I'm going to start to have these conversations more often with my clients about how this may happen. And then from lived and clinical experience, like from lived experience, I'm like, oh yes, I definitely was like, nope, that's a no for me. This area is a no-go during while I'm lactating. It's a no for me.
Mhm.
And we had to kind of have a conversation around it because for my partner, that wasn't how they felt. Like they still were very attracted by that area. It was still a very arousable moment for them. But for me, it was like a shutdown. Like if you go to this area and I'm self-conscious about milk coming out when we're intimate, then it just makes me want to stop. And so really just having that open conversation though with my partner and being able to share that. And so I think it's great to know that this is a possibility because if you can just imagine that you're in that moment, whether it's penetrative or non-penetrative, and you're having this moment and you have no idea about this connective piece in the brain, right? And so this right here is the pituitary gland, and this is the hypothalamus. This is hypothalamus, and so it's the brain and the hypothalamus, and it's showing how that's connected and how that release happens from the nipple stimulation here and then it's ejected out. Again, the same hormonal play happens with orgasm and that release of like freedom and erraticness and all the things. And so I think it's really important to have these conversations beforehand and know that it's a possibility that, hey, when you have an orgasm, there's a possibility that you could trickle, leak, pour, just depending on
Spray.
what your
Yeah.
reflex spray, what your reflex is like, or you may not even experience those things at all. And here's a way that if that is not something that you want to experience, keep your bra on. It's a tangible thing to give them or a suggestion. Or if you're into it, just know it's a possibility and your partner is aware of it. So I just think those conversations are really important to have with our clients. And like I said, it takes me back to a moment of like on our intake forms, especially in lactation, we're asking them so many questions about how feeding's going, but there's so many other opportunities in postpartum to still support them. We have them in front of us in that moment for at least a 60 to hour and a half minute session. Why not start to talk to them about some of these things? And then I also loved how you just really spoke on environments and how environment can really change milk flow or not milk flow. I think the same is true when it comes to intimacy. Like, do you need a candle in this moment of postpartum and you didn't need that before? Do you need to take a relaxing bath and maybe some Epsom salt to just help you not, to just de-stress or just not
Mhm.
overthink things that first moment is happening? Like, what do you really need and what is going to be conducive in your environment so that this can be a pleasurable experience.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that's perfect. Part of what I encourage like clients to do with some of the like exercises I'm going to show y'all in a second is thinking of things like people think of intimacy and sex and approach to sex just as one specific act. But what we have really found is this is more like a longer term thing of
Mhm,
people being able to feel safe and comfortable and rested and cared for. And
mhm,
so when those boxes are marked, then you're much more likely to have a smooth, like pleasurable experience. Um,
mhm.
and so, like you said,
Yeah.
personally, I am like a sensualist. So I
Mhm.
think about all of my senses. And so
Okay.
when I've talked to couples, um, I've said, like, sometimes it's one person is like, hey, I don't need no type of warm up. I can do boom, boom, and be ready. And then there's other people like, oh, I'm not sure. Oh, which is fine. Like,
Uh,
neither one is right or wrong. But if you know that your partner is needing support to get there, then
mhm,
then that's where you can think about the senses, right? So what things are we seeing? Okay, oh, a dim room is supportive for this person, or a bright room, or whatever. Okay, what smells smell really good, that whether it be a room spray, an incense, a little cologne,
mhm,
my favorite cologne or perfume, I'm gonna dab that on. Ooh,
mhm,
what tastes, right? Have you been fed? Have you been nourished? We're going to include a little food in this, like what things can be supportive in that way? And then touch, how do you
mhm.
like to be touched? And
Yeah.
that's a question that I often ask clients, both in doula work as well. Like if I'm doing comfort measures, I ask, like, do you like a lot of pressure? Do you feel comfortable here? But I think when we talk about pleasure, also knowing how someone feels about touch in general is really supportive. Personally, I don't like super light touch. I don't want to feel like you tickling me. No, back up.
Yeah.
But I like more deep pressure, full touch, like things like that. That feels really good for me. So I think if a partner knows that how, they want to be touched themselves or how their partner desires to be touched, then that can really support them in thinking through, like you said, all of the senses, thinking through the full environment of where they are, which
Mhm.
includes the baby and if they have other children, right? Like,
Yeah.
where the kids at? Where the baby at? How we doing? How does this even work
Yes.
in the environment that we're in? And ultimately, like you said, it has to be questions about it. Like it may take some pre-work to get to that point. Over
Mhm,
time, it may become more fluid or less work to get to that point, but
mhm,
sometimes the spontaneity in early postpartum actually isn't conducive to someone being able to like sink into their body and have a pleasurable experience. And so yeah, like you said, we got to think about the full environment
mhm.
of where we are, because it sends signals to our brain, to our bodies in all the ways.
Absolutely. And as you said a couple of things, you talked about smells and senses, and we know that there are also like a lot of protective changes and hormonal changes in our own body smell and senses. And so things that taste different in pregnancy taste different in postpartum. Things you love, you may not like anymore in postpartum. But also your own body's aroma, right? There's a certain smell that is released so that that baby can find you. It's a protective mechanism, right? It's not always something that we embody of that smell. And we're like, oh, this is like, I love smelling like this. For some women or for some nursing and lactating parents, they may attribute that to being like, um, I just feel like I have an odor. They might
Yeah,
see
I'm
that as a
funky.
negative
I don't
connotation.
want to
I'm
do this.
funky.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. I'm musty. And so I'm always like sharing with my families, like, this is a normal part of that hormonal shift, of that, even that estrogen and progesterone shift. It's not going to be forever. And then it's those tangible things of like, okay, what can help me with that? And so
Mhm.
sometimes just doing, it might be like, a little detox that's safe while you're lactating, is such as apple cider vinegar and oh my gosh, what is the other thing? A little bit of lime, apple cider vinegar can also help. And is it black clay? I think it's black clay. That's what I'm thinking of right now.
One thing around that same piece of like if people are feeling a little musty, funky, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and thinking about pleasure and intimacy, my go-to initial suggestion: take a
Mm-hmm.
shower together. That
Mm.
is one, typically doesn't take too long. So like if baby is asleep or kids are napping or something
Mm.
like that, you like, we got 30 minutes or whatever. So a shower is a great way to connect to somebody, especially if you're concerned. One, you may not even be funky, but you postpartum and you ain't gotten a shower in a while, or you got a little throw up from the baby or whatever. So
Yeah, for
that's a great
sure.
way. Take a shower together. You can wash each
Mm.
other's body. You're connected in that way.
Oh.
And that's a non-penetrative way of like really connecting and feeling intimate. And you don't have to be like self-conscious because one, we washing up right now anyways. And whatever soaps or body wash, like that aroma is
Mm-hmm.
in the air. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that's helpful. And then another reason why showering together is a really, really great support and entrance to this kind of thing with people is because it's task based. So sometimes people struggle with intimacy where it's like, oh, we're just laying here. Oh, am I the focus right now? Oh, you're looking at my body, or that, they're
Mm-hmm.
feeling a kind of way. But when someone has a task, oh, I'm showering, I'm rubbing your back, I'm doing something that helps them to shift their focus to the task
Mm-hmm.
itself versus feeling on the spot. Um, and so that's one way, like showering together can be a really one, doesn't require a lot of time. So
Yeah.
if there's smell, there's not pressure that we have to, engage in anything beyond washing each other, hugging, maybe kissing, in the shower together. But it ends up feeling
Mm-hmm.
really like really close and really intimate. And after you're like, oh, you supported me in that. Like, okay, boo,
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's usually one of my like go-to. If you worried about funk, then shower together.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I think just having again, it goes all back to like having these conversations, because if you're feeling like, you're in here feeling like lonely and you're the only one that's experiencing this, and like no other nursing or birthing person is experiencing this, you're not alone. Like someone else experienced it, and normalizing it and having these opportunities of education is what I think would help these experiences be so much more different.
Mhm.
And so I really love, love, love that opportunity of like showering together as, a solution, but also an opportunity
Mhm.
as well. So I love that. That was, see, Jacob, Jay's about to come with it for y'all on these little tangibles. And then this depiction here, it just kind of a reminder of what we just talked about the brain and the hypothalamus, and how there is a connective piece to orgasm and nipple stimulation. And so the key component is oxytocin. And it showed just a reminder of there is research and there is studies that have shown that when you have had an orgasm and you nurse or pump after that, there can be an increase in your prolactin levels. Does that mean that you should just be encouraged to go be intimate with your partner to get your milk supply up? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But from a little fun, educational, research-based standpoint, it's like, huh, okay, makes sense. If this can increase my oxytocin, and orgasm is attached to oxytocin, why would it not increase my prolactin levels? So it's just this little, okay, okay.
A
Um,
little nugget, a
a
little
little
something to
nugget, a little
know.
nugget, but I've been seeing a lot in social media, so it always is a pause of like, let's go fact check that. Let's go fact check it. And of course, it's all connected. And so it's just that opportunity, though, to make sure and a reminder that you're doing things that feel good to you and not because you're being influenced to do those things. That it really is in that moment like, I just want to connect with my partner in this way. I desire this level of intimacy. I want to remain connected with my partner like this. And that is the reason that is kind of propelling that.
And right before we shift, I also want to, uplift people having different experiences. So even if you are without a partner or the client that you're supporting doesn't have a partner, or isn't yet at that place with their partner, you can still experience like pleasure and intimacy within yourself and still access, the release of hormones. Because sometimes, and pleasure, I'm not saying just masturbate, but you can, yeah, be open to that. But even I know if I get a moment of a long time and I can take a little walk or I can chill or whatever, and I'm not as stressed, then I tend to also make more milk at that time just because that relaxation and that
Mhm.
joy of like, oh, I was just chilling outside, kikiing on the phone with my friend, like that felt really good to me.
Mhm.
And so even just knowing that those things, maybe not to the same level, but those things can also be really supportive depending on where a person is, in what state they're currently in, that can be just as supportive when it comes to oxytocin release as being, intimate with a partner.
Absolutely. I love that. And it's just a reminder of like, sometimes just keep it basic. Like you can just keep it so basic, and the most simple and basic thing is what you need in that moment, but it's also supportive of what that goal may be that you have. You're desiring to have more milk, you just go for a walk, or you talk and you have a good moment with your friend or converse with your friend, and lo and behold, you made some more milk. Just keeping it basic and doing the things that you enjoy. Sometimes it's very easy to overthink things and like, okay, what am I going to do to get more milk? Well, we got to get that cortisol level down because that's just a
Yep.
blocker right there. That's going to block everything. It can block your intimacy. It's going to, it's the driver of your stress hormones. And so getting that cortisol level down and intimacy and connection, whether it is, like you said, self-inflicted, with or without a partner, I think is a great opportunity in postpartum to be an outlet for these families that we're supporting. All right. So, we have talked about a lot of amazing things, but we have not touched yet on what touch out really feels and means and looks like. And for a lot of us that are supporting families in postpartum, especially ones that are lactating or just have a baby that has high needs. These are humans that have high needs from us. I think it's really important to just spend a little bit of time on talking about what touched out is like, and that it's normalizing it, kind of understanding where it can stem from, and obviously giving families an opportunity of how to overcome it and some tangible things of how to overcome it. And so if you have a baby that is lactating and nursing and they are attached to you, especially beyond that 1 year mark, it becomes their territory in their mind. Like they really think they own it, like they are the owners of your body. Um, and there's a lot of emotional changes that are happening in that baby, right? And so they're going through a lot of things, teething, they're going to start to seek autonomy. So sometimes it's just understanding biological norms in the infantile state, right? And knowing that it's okay to feel touched and tapped out. Like people stigmatize that, but if you have somebody just coming up and lifting your top up and just going at will to get what they need from you in that moment, it can make you feel a little touched out. And so I would love to hear from you, Jay, on just some of the ways that you support families that may be navigating this and what
Um,
it even looks like.
so certain families and myself, y'all. So my first child, I nursed until a week before he turned 3. Uh,
Okay.
and then I'm currently nursing, my baby is 14 months. So
Okay.
yeah, I know how touched out, can feel. And often you see that people who are doing extended nursing
Mhm.
don't desire to have pleasure. Because like you said, you're like, I've been touched all day. I've been doing this. I don't want to be touched again in this moment. And so like in a second, we're going to talk about like intimacy spheres and like different actions that feel good. And that's where that can be really helpful, because if touch is not something you want right now,
Mm-hmm.
okay, maybe we're not going to start there, but what things are you open to? Or are you open to doing things together? But we're not, like I think there's ways that people don't even want to approach sex because they're like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm touched out. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then also thinking about how, if with a partner, they can support you with being able to reset before y'all are intimate. So
Mm.
if part of why you're touched out
Ooh.
if part of why you're touched out is because the kids always on me doing this, I'm having to feed this, I'm having to do this, da 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 da. Well, okay, if you want us to be able to connect today, later, whatever the point, take some of these things
I
off
know
my
that's
to-do
right.
list. So it not only frees up my mind some, but it gives my body the opportunity. And maybe this is where it's, hey, I'm gonna be on parent duty right now. You've been
Mm-hmm.
on all day. Go take your shower, go lay down, go do
Mm-hmm.
whatever for an hour or two so that you can get some of that rest and have some time where you are not being touched. Because if you go straight from having a baby touching you and kids and all of that to then another part, it's just like everybody back up. I want a moment to myself. And so, the client being able to know how to, one, ask for that or take that moment
Mm-hmm.
for themselves is supportive, but also their partner reminding them and
Mm-hmm.
creating space for them to take that, that space for themselves is really important as well. And then as a provider, whether it be a doula, lactation consultant, nurse, or however you show up with clients, that's
Mm-hmm.
a great question that you can ask too, because you may, how are things going? They may say, it's fine,
Right.
but if you ask, how are you taking time for yourself?
Mm-hmm.
You know, uh,
Yeah.
and people think it always has to be big stuff, but it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
If I have this protected 45 minutes at the end of every day that I give,
Mm-hmm.
that can be really helpful. And so when people are touched out, you do have to, one, provide space and time for them to reset, but also
Mm-hmm.
think through what type of touch may you be open to. Like you shared before, touching on my chest or my breast or whatever is a no-go, because
Yeah.
okay, cool. But I'll
Yeah.
take this foot massage though. You know,
Ah! I love that. And
so
yeah, I think that's so helpful because a lot of times we have a love language before we have children and before we enter into mother or parenthood. And that love language can change significantly after that. And so doing a like check-in and kind of like starting to notice a trend, like what used to like be the sparking moment to kind of get them happy and going is not that same moment anymore. And I think for both partners, that can definitely change. So it
mhm.
used to be a lot of like affection was like my love language before we had children. And it still is one of them. But if you go do those dishes for me and you got
Woo!
that laundry done, I cannot get things listen.
Well,
I
I think
cannot let me get these kids to bed.
I saw something recently. It was like, I'm a chore sexual. Like, you do some chores, that'll turn me on. but I
Yes.
mean, but it's real. Like when it is those like acts of service or like supporting someone in that way, it's really helpful. And although that may be specific to whoever the partner is,
Uh-huh.
as a support person, you can ask, hey, are you receiving this? Or if you're talking to both people, you can say, hey,
Yeah.
here's a way that you can support. If you're a doula, a postpartum doula, that's something maybe you can take on. I can go ahead and wash these dishes or throw this load of baby clothes in the laundry or whatever for you. So then I know you're not worried about this later and you can have a moment for yourself. So even as, doulas and support people, like there are ways that we can show up and allow them to have that time for themselves. You're like, as your lactation consultant, you're trying to figure out milk, all this, and maybe I can guide you and provide you with some supports. So then this isn't stressing you out as much or isn't taking as much time. You doing triple feedings, and all of these things.
Yeah.
When you have the time and space to just,
Mhm.
then it's like, okay, now what does feel good? What do I desire?
Mhm.
And so yeah. But
Yeah.
let's hop in a little bit. So I did see that there was a question. Um,
Okay.
And then before we get into the last track today, that is really going to be the tangible, takeaways for navigating conversations with clients, no matter if they feeling like this, woo, let's get to it, or if they're like, I'm not feeling it about this pleasure and intimacy yet. That's what we're really going to talk about for this last part is like, I've dropped some things, but we're really going to go more in depth right now. But in the chat, on a scale of 1 to 10, as we answer any other questions that may have been there, how comfortable right now do y'all feel talking about intimacy with your clients? And it can also be, is this something that comes up for y'all? So just kind of, if you have a little bit, feel free to drop it. Your level of comfortability, as well as we move forward, if you have any specific questions about how to do this with clients, you can drop that as well. But Tiffany, there was a question before. I'm not sure if you saw.
Okay. Let me reshare the screen.
It was copied to the chat.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, so I see a 7 in there. Is it okay to smoke when you're lactating? Define smoke. Tell me what you mean by that.
What kind of smoke are we talking about?
What kind of smoke are we talking about here? That's definitely a conversation to be had off this webinar, but because it's multifaceted and multi-layered. But I definitely can answer that question. It depends on what context you're talking about. Message me after this. I got an answer for you. Okay.
But right now,
yeah. Oh, go ahead.
It looks like most people, I see overall 7, 8 maybe. Feeling pretty comfortable. Good. So yay, I love being in the space where folks are pretty comfortable about discussing intimacy with clients. And so we're gonna talk about it. And like I said, as you have more questions, feel free to drop them. And then hopefully what I'm also gonna really lean into is there's 2 different exercises that I often do with clients. So y'all are free to utilize these. Oh, we can see you, Tiffany. Y'all are free to utilize these as we move forward. And little plug, I have a pleasure journal that is full of like prompts and activities and things like that. So typically when I work with clients for like pleasure doula support, the 2 things we're going to do are in this journal, but I'll have them have the journal and we'll work through certain activities together. So then, this is like ongoing support. So depends on my journey with the client, initial visit, however, overall. Okay, overall you feel comfortable. Cool. So the first part that I want to start at is whenever you are talking about, pleasure and intimacy with clients or things of that nature, is doing some like birth worker self-reflection. That's kind of the first part, and just thinking to yourself, do you have or what are your biases around pleasure? Are you comfortable saying the word like orgasms, kink, suck, taste, any of those kind of like words? Like, are you to saying it? I think some people are like, oh, and although we can be very professional and clinical sometimes about things, when you're talking about intimacy and pleasure, you want people to feel comfortable to share and talk to you about those things. And so sometimes it may, like, we may know that the technical word is vulva, for an area. If we're talking about pleasure and intimacy and we have that level of relationship, if my client says coochie, I'm not gonna correct you but hey, that's the words that you use to describe those areas of your own body. And so that's what we can move with. And so I think that's a piece of like, what level of comfortability do you have talking about these things with? Because a lot of people, unless you're specifically in the sex or kink world or pleasure world or something like that, a lot of people are not talking about their sex and intimacy lives with everybody. Usually maybe your partner, your close friends, and that's kind of it. And so for someone to feel comfortable having these conversations with you, you want to be able to meet them where they are and not feel like shame for using certain language or things like that. And then another piece is for your self-reflection is not coming in with assumptions. We don't
Oh.
know what's going on with folks. So
Mm.
you don't want to assume that someone is, especially like you said, if it's an initial visit or something of that nature, you don't want
Mm-hmm.
to assume they're in a heterosexual relationship. You don't want to assume they're in a monogamous relationship. Um, and so those are kind of like some keys where the next piece is like, don't yuck someone's yum, or like leading with curiosity, right? So you want to ask questions of, okay, what with your current partner or partners, like what is y'all's dynamic like? And so allow that space for the person to tell you versus saying, oh, well, with your husband, well, that may not be my husband, or they may not identify like that, or, or whatever the case. And so lead with questions so that people can tell you about themselves and where they are. Um, and then, yeah, same thing how we talked about before. Can you normalize certain body changes and certain shifts? So if there is leakage or with arousal or dryness or any things like that, like, can you make that feel normal for someone? Or are you saying it and you also tensed up and looking uncomfortable? Like, so I think just taking a moment to really reflect for yourself, and also knowing if this is not your main area of discussion, that is okay, right? You can exactly point to other resources, refer people out, like that is totally okay. And I think you can say that in the conversation of, hey, I wanted to check in about this. Your pleasure and your intimacy is an important part of your postpartum
Mm-hmm.
experience. I want to be able to support you. And I can support to this level,
Mm-hmm.
like this is where I am on my journey. I think that's really important to be transparent about that. Uh,
Absolutely.
and knowing that no matter, there's no judgment either way. If someone is like fully sexual free and open and have multiple partners and do various things,
Mm-hmm.
cool. As well as someone who is very modest, like that's also cool. And they can experience pleasure in their own ways as well. And so not having people to feel a type of way depending on their relationship to their own bodies to pleasure. But yeah, as a birth worker and someone supporting, always starts with, how do I feel about that? What is my own relationship to pleasure? What was I taught about pleasure when I was younger? I think when I did some self reflection myself before really working with other people, I realized how much, like, my mom was pretty open about certain things. And so that was cool. But then there were also things in my family that was like really judgy of other people that
Mm-hmm.
presented in certain ways. And so I was like, oh, I hadn't thought much about it being that age, but then being older, I'm like, oh, hold up, I don't ascribe to that. Let me let that be here. And so I think it's just really important to take a moment to reflect and check in with yourself before you start supporting other people or having these conversations with folks. Um,
I
and
absolutely love that. Yeah, I think that's great because these are some really personal and intimate conversations. And if you're not even sure what your own thoughts or feelings around those are, or you like cringe when you say it, or you just are like, ooh, I'm kind of uncomfortable talking about this, I think there's an opportunity to definitely get more information and kind of self-explore. And then a warm handoff may be warranted, as I like to call it, where, hey, this is a little out of my comfort zone, but I really want to ensure that you get the support that you need. I'm going to hand you off very warmly to this person.
mm-hmm. No, I think that's beautiful. And then the next part, like with your reflection as well, that goes into potential biases and things like that, is trauma-informed considerations, which we hit on that already, but there's still some pieces that I think is important to like really name, is
Mm-hmm.
that one, like we said, there's assessments, and sometimes as a doula, you may or may not have those or have the depth of them. And I think this applies whether you have previous information from a client, because some people may have had experiences and not included it on there, right? Or not even thought about it. And so one is just knowing that not every pregnancy was consensual or desired. And so sometimes it was consensual, but it was like, we was hunching, but I already had some other kids. I wasn't planning on having more. And so
Mm-hmm.
sometimes when that is the case, people, when it comes to accessing pleasure after the fact, can be really hesitant because they're like, I don't want to get pregnant again.
Uh-huh.
Or if it was non consensual, then that's some trauma that may come up when they do start to approach intimacy again. So I think knowing that not everyone had the experience of, oh, I was planning to be pregnant and then I got pregnant and it was great and da 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 da, because that may not be the case for everyone. And if they share, great, but if not, that's okay too. You don't have to know the ins and outs of everybody's situation in order to support them. But I do think it's important that you just be cognizant that there's different situations of how people have become pregnant. Um, and then birth trauma, same thing, also impacts arousal and their desire to engage in certain types of like play or intimate connections. So if someone had, sometimes if they had a C-section, they may be more sensitive around their stomach area and not, um, feeling, uh, you know, self-conscious about that. If someone tore and at the perineum, they may be feeling iffy about that. So there could be just some different things that occurred in birth that can impact how they feel. Also, how you mentioned before, even if birth went well, if they're struggling with lactation or if their birth plan changed, people sometimes can hold a lot of feelings of inadequacy. And
Absolutely.
so then when it comes to pleasure, they may be even more critical of themselves, and hyper aware of their body and what their body is doing, which then creates stress. And that's the cortisol that then inhibits oxytocin. It becomes a snowball effect. And so,
Everything.
exactly. And so just
Mhm.
kind of knowing that previous experiences impact how someone's showing up. Um, and then, like I said before, lead with curiosity and also understanding the intention. And so
Mm.
that's a question that you can really ask when you start to work with someone. If they're talking about sex or talking about pleasure and they're like, oh, we think we want to or don't, or whatever the case, I like
Mhm.
to ask, okay, well, what's the intention? Do you want to have sex just for the sake of having sex? Is it that you want to be able to have orgasms? Is it that you want to just feel more connected to your partner?
Wow.
Is it that you want to be able to like release and rest more? Like, what is really the intention that you have? Because you
Mhm.
may be able to obtain connection with your partner without doing anything that's penetrative.
I
And you
love
can still
that.
feel really good. And so there isn't a pressure to do things at a certain timeline, or I should be here, or I should.
Mm.
Hold on. You may only be thinking of it in one way. Let's expand what intimacy and what pleasure looks like and what it means for us and get to the root of what our real intention is. And then we can
Mhm.
figure out a journey and a pathway to getting there. Um, and so I think before you really start working with clients or in that first visit, being very clear on what the intention is going to support you with then, moving forward in future visits.
I think that's so important. I remember even like my own lived experience in dealing with a tear and trying to recover, like having a redemptive VBAC, vaginal birth after cesarean, and assuming that like not even realizing that there is still a lot of recovery happening in those two different journeys, like two different kind of journeys, right? And not even having a doula, just not a lot of talk around like the care and the aftermath of that. And then when it came to intimacy, starting to wonder like, is it going to feel different from my partner? Is my body going to feel the same to my partner? Like, I just don't think that people like open up the space to talk about that enough. And so, what I would have appreciated is just like some normalcy around those kind of conversations, helping me connect with my partner in different ways outside of penetration. And I feel like that's an important opportunity and moment. We know as birth workers supporting families and even families on here that may be listening is a lot of times if we have unresolved, whether it's childhood trauma or adulthood trauma, it will show its little self up
Yeah.
during pregnancy and postpartum. And
Mm.
so it's a great opportunity during pregnancy to start to unpack that because we know that it may impact how their postpartum journey goes, especially when it comes to this intimacy component. So I just love all the nuggets that you're dropping through this.
Yay, thank you. So here's where we about to do our feature, our singles from our
Ah,
album.
yes.
So the next two things are just exercises that I've done with clients to support these conversations and support their reflection. And so I'm going to share these with y'all. And I do know we only have about 10, 15 minutes and we want to have time for like questions and engaging and stuff like that. But the first one is body mapping. So, and I'll read this piece because I know it's a little bit small, but body mapping is essentially a way that you can say what you're feeling in your body, right? And so typically this is something that I would have both people do. So then the person who is postpartum or pregnant, you know, or not pregnant, like anybody, I use this with all clients. This is a good like starting place, but so that they can assess where they are in their own body. And so another thing to note is that your erogenous zones, those are like areas all around the body that have like heightened sensitivity. And stimulation of those areas can ignite a sexual response. And so that's kind of where like, okay, thinking of erogenous zones, thinking of our body. And so typically what I have folks do in their journals, they have like this outline of a person. And then I tell them pick 3 colors. Using the stoplight, red, yellow, green works great, but it can be whatever colors folks desire. But you get the assignment and you work solo. So you think through pre baby, if this is someone who's postpartum, what areas were like, yes, that's the spot. I love that. That does what it
Yes.
do. Touch me here. Yellow is but I'm open, or maybe like I'm indifferent. It's cool. And then red are like, oh, this is uncomfortable to me for whatever reason. Then those are red. And so if you're working with someone in postpartum, they can do this and say, hey, pre-baby, this is for the example I put on here, maybe it's like, oh, rub my thighs, play with that cat, massage my feet, give me scalp massage. Like those are things that someone may have like,
Mm.
pre-baby. And then in postpartum, so you have them do that first, and then maybe they share with each other. This is what I really love. Da, 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 da. And then you can do another one. How are you feeling now in your body? If they don't know, then that can be homework, right? Hey, go home over the next week or two, whatever. Think about this and fill it in, and then y'all have the discussion. And so things can change. Maybe the scalp massage was a green light, yes, before, but now in postpartum, I've lost hair. I'm feeling sensitive about, my hair in postpartum. So that may be like a little uncomfy area. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
I'm lactating now. So my chest is off limits. Don't do that. Or maybe because of my body changes, my stomach is off limits. I don't like that, but I do like in my arms. I'm more open to those things. And so the
Mm-hmm.
body map is really just supposed to be a picture of like, okay, this is how this feels, and hopefully it can serve as visual starting points for them to engage with each other. And so now we've clearly discussed, instead of, oh well, because I ask people, how or where do you like to be touched? Oh well, I'm not sure, but if they do something I don't like, I say it.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah.
how about we lean into the things that we do like, the things that do feel pleasurable? And so by doing a body map, both partners, one, reflect within themselves, but then they can communicate and show each other, like, hey, this feels good. And so now I know, oh, the mouth is green. Okay, we can make out. That feels really good to you. And so maybe that's where we start if we're thinking about intimacy. Um, and then the next kind of exercise that I like to share is intimacy spheres. And so, kind of how we mentioned before, intimacy is more than sex. It's being able to feel intimate in non-sexual moments. Being able to feel intimate in non-sexual moments can also help to build more connection. And so naming actions and how they feel for you helps to communicate where you currently are and options to connect with a partner. And so what I often have here is kind of like an inner sphere, outer sphere, is I'll tell folks, hey, take 10 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever, fill this in with different actions, right? Of things that
Mm.
feel intimate, like very intimate, regular intimate, and then outside of that sphere, it's just kind of like, oh, this is cool. And so it doesn't just have to be sexual, right? So things that's intimate, oh, telling each other about our day. Very intimate may be like disclosing really sensitive information, whatever. What feels intimate? Oh, taking a walk with a friend. It can be a variety of things. So I tell people think, sexually, but also outside of that, and just write out things that feel intimate to you. Taking a shower together. Maybe that's very intimate for one person, but just intimate for another person. Massaging each other, whatever the case. And so I have people kind of fill this in with the different things. So then when we come back together and have the conversation, this also provides starting points for connection. Because if we're not yet at penetrative sex or something, cool. Or you're feeling touched out or you're feeling whatever the case, we'll start outside and then eventually work our way in. So maybe it is that we're starting to just take a walk together, or maybe it is that we're doing massages before we get to something. Like, I don't even need to suggest something very intimate if we haven't even done the things that are, regular intimate. And then the 4 other keys that I kind of mentioned before as well: rest, safety, connection, and care are key to being open to and leaning into more intimacy. So if someone is not rested, let's take a nap together. Let's watch the show and cuddle up. Like, get the rest that you need. Safety. So that can come into thinking about birth control or preventative measures. Like, that's one version of safety. I don't want to even engage in sex because I don't feel safe for the sense of it could produce another child. It's
Wow.
sometimes people's like hesitancy. So let's talk about it. What are we going to do anything or not, in regards to potentially creating more children? That's a level of safety. And then connection, right? Same things. They may need to feel connected. So sending nice affirmations, especially if you know that someone is feeling self-conscious about a particular area, send affirmations, reaffirm, your partner or birthing person like throughout time. And then as a provider, I think also you can reaffirm what's normal and reaffirm your client as well to help combat some like thoughts that may not be true. And then people just feeling cared for is really important, in knowing like my care for you is about our connection, is about you being well in your holistic like experience of pleasure. It's not just about orgasming or just having sex. Like, I care about you and I care about being intimate with you, and feeling cared for in that way also really supports people to not feel like, oh, I'm just something to be used in this way. And so these 2 exercises, the body map and the intimacy spheres, are really, really helpful to kind of talk about pleasure in somebody's relationship to pleasure. Both, if you're just giving it as like, hey, go home and reflect or fill this out, talk to your partner, about this thing, or being present while they work through it and maybe asking some questions or giving some insights as they fill it out. Yeah, those are my 2 main.
These are some great tools. I just want to say, like, when we were prepping for our talk today in this workshop today, and you shared these 2 tools with me, I thought to myself, okay, I got to ask her how I can get a copy of this, number one. And I just wanted to really be able to go back and take these and share. But I learned about your journal offering that you have. And so I think this is a great way to just have a reflective pause for families to really do checking in, like just map it out where it's a yes and where it's a no, or maybe in between. I'm not sure yet. And then with this spear, it's like, okay, these are ways that are really going to help me be get it close to more of that very intimate moment. And if I'm not rested or safe, or I don't feel connection or care, I may not be able to get there. And so what can I do to help my partner get to those moments? I love it. I love
Yeah.
it. I love it. I love it.
I feel good, yes, but definitely have different little offerings. So like we can connect. I know we have a couple minutes,
Mm-hmm.
and so there's some last little pieces that you can also hit on, right? About feeding or pumping before intimacy. If you are feeling iffy about leaking prior, or leaking or fluids or anything, like reducing shame, let's use a towel. Same thing, let's hop in
Mhm.
that shower. It'll wash right down, just any of those things. And I think the big piece here is that slow buildup to increase oxytocin. And so if you know the areas of the body that someone feels comfortable, if you have been building up and doing things to build intimacy and build connection over time, then it will release more and more oxytocin over time. And then knowing not all intimacy has to be penetrative, right?
Mhm.
And so you can get there if that's where you desire to get, but being able to
Mhm.
connect, to massage, to touch, to kiss, to, do all of these, use a toy or whatever the case is also just as valuable
Mhm.
as penetrative.
Yeah, and I think that was like a really key takeaway moment of like non-penetrative options because I think a lot of times when you have these intimacy discussions, it's an assumption that it automatically means penetrative sex, and it doesn't have to mean that. And so finding some ways to help these families really navigate this in a different way. We talked through some of the things already in our discussion about, maybe I'm going to keep my bra on, or if I'm a leaker and I don't want my bra off, maybe I'm just going to put some towels down on the bed, right? If, we're navigating some of those lower estrogen, you talked about also having there's traditional lubrication, and then there's some safer options of that may be more food grade oils like avocado oils, coconut oils, even black seed oils. Black seed is an anti-inflammatory agent, and it also in an oil form can have kind of a tingling and kind of a warm up effect when placed on the outside of the vagina. And so maybe that's something that you just give information around. It's not saying to do this, but you explore and research more yourself and learn about that. And then it may be something that you decide that you feel comfortable sharing with your families. And so just really exploring some of those tools. We talked
And
a lot on these things, but yeah.
sorry, real quick, because that actually is a great piece that other things can be used as lubrication. And
Yes.
also always share anything that is oil based
Mhm.
is contraindicated to use with latex condoms
Oh,
because
yes,
it'll break
yes,
them down some. So if they're doing
yes.
any type of oil and a latex condom, but if they're not, if they're using like a lambskin or some other type or not using a condom, then oils are totally fine.
Thank you. Thank
Mhm.
you for reminding us of that. So yes, it has been a really amazing oxytocin flow track list playlist today. We started out with some history. We definitely got through some of the nitty gritty of the hormones themselves. And then we really got to some tangible components of it and the bread and the butter and the body mapping and the intimacy mapping. And just really, I hope for you that have attended this, that you just feel less taboo about talking about these things and having these conversations with the families that you are supporting.
Yes. Let's see. Yes. So I see someone asked about the slides. I believe so. I feel like BlackBerry, maybe if y'all were like registered, that would be a way to connect, or that this will be available.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. Were there other questions too? I will say that I would love to stay connected. And so Instagram for me is the most way that I connect with, just regular community. You can comment, you can engage. I love for that. You can DM me. If you're just like, hey, I want some light combo, quick question, things of that nature. If you are wanting more like mentorship, if you have a client that you're trying to refer, if you yourself need like pleasure related support, then that would be something to get a consult about. So, but yeah, let's stay connected, y'all.
Yes, absolutely. And just like you, Jay, you will find me on Instagram a lot more. So you can definitely connect with me there. I love sharing relatable videos that just normalize more about breast and chest feeding, whatever that looks like for you, whether you're navigating an exclusively pumping journey, or whether you have your baby attached more to your chest and breast. Just really just disseminating that information. So my Instagram link is there, so you can find me over there. And then I would love to stay connected as well. And I am completely open and fine with these slides being disseminated to either of you guys. We only made them for like talking points, but if they are something that really spoke to you, I feel comfortable with sharing that to you guys and making sure that this is a resource that you have available for sure.
Let's see. Yes, please. Yes, please. Okay, beautiful. But yes, let's stay connected. Everybody deserves pleasure, y'all, in all the ways. So
Yes.
we can talk about it. Got some journals, got some PDF downloads about creating a pleasure practice and ritual, like all the things. So yeah, I think we all, even outside of working with clients, we deserve to feel joy and feel pleasurable in our everyday lives,
We sure do.
even as our bodies go through various changes at different times. So yeah.
Yes. And if you have any last questions, I think we have like, oh, we right at time. So if you have any last questions you want to drop, please drop them in the chat or in the Q&A. Oh, good, Darlene. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Oh, awesome. Thanks for following us, Bree. Oh, it will be recorded. It's on Facebook Live, so you can go back and watch it.
Yeah, so this is recorded. Sorry, y'all, this is Jasmine talking from BlackBerry. We are recording this and it will be uploaded to our YouTube channel later.
Yay,
Okay.
beautiful. Thank you, everybody.
Well, thank you guys again for being in this safe space. And thank you for those that chimed in with questions in the chat that were just open in this space. And we just hope that you can take all this information back to the families, yourself, whomever you're going to support. And we enjoy being in this space with you guys today. So thank you for allowing us to educate and disseminate some information to each and every one of you.
Hey, and on behalf of BlackBerry, I just want to say a big thank you to Tiffany and Jay for hosting this amazing workshop. Um, Definitely thinking of other things to come because I feel like we got to come out with the next album. Even solo releases, do a few features here and there. But this was so dope. Absolutely loved it. And just want to thank y'all for taking the time to be here and doing this for our community.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yes, I'm always like, let's talk about pleasure. Let's talk about sex. Right? Let's talk about it, because so many people don't. But always love being able to connect to folks, especially to birth workers, care workers, because this is so important. So thank y'all, BlackBerry, for creating the space for it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jasmine, for creating this space.